much anticipated film. This is a film franchise that has been really around the block, right? The Knives Out movie was originally made, produced, and released by Lionsgate. People loved it. It was incredibly impressive. It was a real shining moment for Rian Johnson, who had taken just absolutely tons of shit after he made the Star Wars movies, right? And people were like, wow, this is what you need to be doing. You have the gift of doing the Who Done It. You have a perfectly cast Daniel Craig, who was just wrapping up his responsibilities as Agent 007, the greatest 007 of my life, obviously, but I think potentially ever. And it was just a magnificent storm that came together a few years back. Netflix revived it. They were like, we're going to buy the rights to it and we're going to produce it. They made Glass Onion starring Ed Norton. I absolutely loved that film. So I couldn't wait. Gavin couldn't wait either. We were super excited to go to the premiere. We got to see it at our local cinema. Shout out to the Screenland Armor, where we saw it in their main red curtain theater with a sold out audience of people who were just absolutely thrilled to be at the movies. And I have to say, before we get into this, that definitely impacted my experience, because while I love this franchise and I'm going to sing a lot of its praises, I do think maybe if I'm going to come out here and spoil my take a little bit, I liked it, but I thought it was the weakest of the Knives Out trilogy.
Completely agree. Unfortunately, I completely agree. I love this series. I love Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc. I think it's the perfect 007 role for him to kind of settle into. It lets him play a more eccentric side of himself. A side that, frankly, is my favorite of Daniel Craig. Ever since I saw him in Logan Lucky, I was like, this dude, as much as I love him as Bond, I was like, this dude really is a character actor. He can do wacky, weird characters and strange people. And I do think that's where his talent ultimately lies, as you see in films like the Knives Out films. He's so brilliant as Benoit Blanc, but also in Queer last year. Just playing a character that most people wouldn't necessarily associate with Daniel Craig, but I think that he really pulls off. So I'm so glad to see him, have this gig and to be able to come back and do this every couple of years. Even though I have mixed thoughts on this film, I certainly hope they make another. I think there's so much potential in this series, and it has just become sort of a really fun Thanksgiving tradition to go see the new Knives Out movie every couple of years and kind of get invested in Rian Johnson's latest Who Done It. So again, big fan of the series. I really love the first one. The first one is easily my favorite of the series, but I was really impressed by Glass Onion because it totally went in a direction that I wasn't expecting at all for the series. It totally kind of blew my mind as far as where they took the concept of Knives Out in a way that felt so refreshing. Because again, even though it wasn't what I was expecting or even what I liked about the original, it just felt like, whoa, like that's a whole new direction to take this in. It felt genuinely ambitious, and it also felt really impressive on a visual level. Like it really felt like a blockbuster movie with blockbuster sets and exotic locations and amazing special effects. This obviously stacked cast, much like all of these films. And I can't help but feel that this one's just a major step back conceptually. When it comes to the screenwriting, when it comes to the location, it just seems like a much kind of cheaper and lazier film in a lot of ways. Although I still enjoyed it. That's what has to be said. I did still enjoy this film, and much like with Jay Kelly, we're comparing it to better work from the same director, so we're going to have to hold it to a higher standard. If this was the first Knives Out movie, maybe I would be singing its praises a little bit more. But I know what Johnson's capable of with Daniel Craig in this role, and again, to me, this film just felt like a huge step back after such an ambitious swing for the fences with Glass Onion. I felt this was a real, kind of attempt to return to the style of the first movie, but without a lot of what made that original film so good.
Oh, yes, completely agree. This felt like a Netflix movie in a way that Glass Onion did not. It felt cheap. It felt much more limited in scope and in the stage design, right? In the production value. Well, I went back after it was over because I was like, maybe I'm just, I have, a recency bias against this. And I've built up the first Knives Out to be so much. So I went home immediately after watching it and I put on Knives Out, right? And I watched it. And it's so rich, it's so textured, it's so immersive. The home that they built is so ornate. And the casting is another thing that I want to talk about. We're not gonna. I don't want to spoil anything on the show today, right? I know a lot of people haven't seen Knives Out. It hasn't been released to Netflix yet, so I'm gonna keep my criticisms tailored to people who haven't seen the film. But what I thought was less successful about this film than the first two films, and particularly the first film, you mentioned script problems. They spent far too much time, in my opinion, developing the protagonist, Josh O'Connor, and not enough time developing the cast members. When I went back and watched Knives Out, and when I think about Glass Onion, I remember and can easily pull out so many iconic characters. The Jamie Lee Curtis character, the Christopher Plummer character. You had Chris Evans, who has this like snooty, like I'm an entitled brat vibe going on. Then you have Michael Shannon, who's the dude that loves his dad and can't, step out from under his shell. They're all very memorable characters. That was the same deal in Glass Onion. You had Edward Norton, but you also had the guy who was the stand-in for Rogan. You had Janelle Monáe's character. You had all of these memorable characters. And in this film, I felt like there was only one memorable addition to the cast, and that was the guy who was the failed Republican candidate. I thought they really captured something there. And if they would have been able to repeat that with the other characters in the film, I think that they would have been more successful. But they rest so much of it on this idea that Joshua O'Connor has become a priest because he's a boxer that killed somebody in a boxing match. And I really didn't like that decision in the script because nobody looks at Josh O'Connor and thinks that's a boxer who killed somebody in a boxing match. He doesn't have the mass as a man. I could buy that Joshua O'Connor was a Golden Gloves champion in 1925 if you cast him that way. He has that kind of a look. As a modern boxer in 2025, there's no way he killed somebody with his bare hands. And there's a couple of cheesy references to his boxing past where he like beats the crap out of a punching bag for no reason with no wraps on, and there's no scars on his knuckles, and there's no busted blood from how hard he's hitting the bag. And it was just a couple of decisions like that, compounding with the fact that I didn't feel like they developed the cast as well as they have in the past, all kind of dampered my enjoyment. But I have to say, we saw it in a sold out theater. Everybody in the audience seemed to absolutely fucking love it.
Yeah, 100%. And that was the best part about seeing this film was the theater experience, like you mentioned, the excited crowd laughing when they were supposed to. They even clapped at the end, which was fun, you know. So again, great theater going experience. I highly recommend watching this film in the theater on Thanksgiving weekend if you have the opportunity to, or even if it's already at home, you know, with your family in the living room. It would be a fun time, just like the other Knives Out movie. But yeah, it is such a big step down, and I think the ensemble thing is a huge part of that. They're never able to really give these characters the sort of dynamics that emerged in the first two, that resulted in all of this good drama. Right, that's what the first two movies really understand. They have the murder mystery, but it's also ultimately a character drama. And here, I never really felt that drama, which is weird because it takes place in this small town, and you know, small towns are notorious for drama and gossip and secrets, right? And you know, people kind of turning on each other and all this kind of juicy, kind of like Twin Peaks coded stuff. None of that is here. Almost none of that is here. And when they try to insert it, it just feels kind of flat to me, partially because these characters are never truly developed, and there's just so many of them that you're supposed to care about right off the bat, but you're never really given a reason to. Like, for example, the Kaylee Spaney character. I'm a huge fan of Kaylee Spaney, but I thought she was not only really miscast here, but totally misused. Like, her character just doesn't really do anything, and you're like, why is this person here? Why are they even in this small town? This makes no fucking sense.
Are you talking about the woman in the wheelchair?
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the cello.
Didn't make sense.
No, and it's like, again, Kaylee Spaney is a good actress. I was looking forward to her inclusion in this film, but again, she felt miscast. For one, this character should have been played by someone like 20 years older. It felt weird to have Kaylee Spaney playing the character. But again, also it never goes anywhere. You never find out anything interesting about this character. Never really factors into the plot in an interesting way. It's just another person so they can introduce the opening lineup of suspects, that you can be like, "Who? Maybe she was behind it. What's going on here?" But again, they never do anything interesting with the character in the way they do with basically all of the characters in Knives Out and in Glass Onion, because they're actually connected in an interesting way. I thought the same thing about the Jeremy Renner character. This is Jeremy Renner's big return to the screen after his near fatal snowplow accident from a few years ago, which was really horrific. So I was glad to see him back on screen. I love Jeremy Renner. But again, I just felt like he didn't have the time, and they didn't write enough into the script for him to really be able to sink his teeth into this role and get me to care about this character beyond just the kind of bland stereotype that is put forth here. And I felt that way about basically every single character in this film except for the Josh O'Connor character, which I did really like. I love Josh O'Connor as an actor. I always say that he looks like someone that doesn't feel too modern. He doesn't feel like someone who was just looking at an iPhone, 10 minutes before the camera started rolling. He really does kind of have that, like, timeless face where you could see him in a movie from the 60s or the 70s or something like that. And he brings that charisma to this film. He basically is playing the role here that Anna de Armas played in the first movie and that Janelle Monáe played in the second movie, which is like the one townsperson that Benoit Blanc actually kind of forms a relationship with and finds some trust with. So he definitely is the main character here, and I'm glad that they went with Josh O'Connor because despite what you were mentioning with the kind of silly boxing thing, I still did really enjoy his performance. I enjoyed his screen presence. I enjoyed his relationship with Benoit Blanc. But yeah, I felt that this film was really lacking when it came to that ensemble dynamic, the drama between them all, and then ultimately the atmosphere. I was really shocked by how poor the atmosphere in this was, and I couldn't tell if it's because of Netflix or because of Ryan Johnson.
It seemed like a Netflix move to me.
It totally did. The cinematography is oftentimes just downright kind of bad here. Like, you never get good deep focus shots. Everything is in way too close up all the time, with the shallow focus, blurred out background, which is becoming increasingly common on Netflix. You saw that a lot in Jay Kelly too, which fucking infuriated me. And it doesn't let you soak up the background of these rich
Yeah.
environments in which these stories are taking place, something that's so integral to the first movie, as you mentioned, but also that I thought was really well done in Glass Onion. There's so much to look at in Glass Onion. It's like a fucking I Spy book. You're like, there's just so much on frame and so much interesting production design decisions being made, that you're always entertained. There's always something in frame to look at. You could rewatch that movie 3 or 4 times and probably find something new in it every time. But again, this film just felt flat. It felt flat. It felt like, it took place mostly in like 4 or 5 different locations, none of which really felt that rich or
Even the
interesting.
church.
Even the church, yeah, it felt empty. And that's the other thing about this movie. It's like, I get that it takes place in a small town, but is this church congregation the only people that live in the small town? It almost feels like in this film the only residents of this town are the members of the congregation who are also the members of this film's ensemble, and it just makes it all feel really empty. Like, it makes this feel like an empty fake town that's almost like on a Hollywood backlot somewhere. It was also filmed in England despite taking place in New York. And I just thought they missed out on so many opportunities for rich atmosphere, for dark shadows. So much of this movie takes place during the day, which I thought was a weird decision. Again, if you're going to make a small town New York murder mystery, I feel like the obvious choice would be to set a lot of it at night, kind of in the more nocturnal hours. But so much of this is just set during like boring periods of the day when the lighting is just bland and kind of undynamic. And I don't know, I just never was able to sink into the world and the atmosphere in this film in the way that I was so excited to, given the kind of plot synopsis, and given the fact that it is kind of a return to the more simple murder mystery vibe of the original movie, which has such rich atmosphere. You could just turn that movie on, and like people turn on the fake log burning on the TV on Christmas or Thanksgiving just for the atmosphere. You could just have that movie on, and it projects this beautiful autumnal atmosphere. This movie felt like such a step down when it came to all of that from a cinematography and production design standpoint. And I don't know, that really bugged me.
Yeah, for sure. I think one positive of the film that we haven't celebrated yet is I thought it was a very good performance from Josh Brolin. I liked him. I thought that he was another character that was, able to break out, right? Because you're so right that even Jeremy Renner, the only reason you pay attention to him is because he's Jeremy Renner. And you're like, oh, Jeremy Renner's staring there. And that's the same problem Kerry Washington has. It's like, oh, yeah, you wanted to cast a hot chick so it wasn't just a bunch of old people and dudes hanging around, but then you didn't give her anything to do. You didn't develop her at all. She doesn't have any integral role to play. You just make, passing references to her, and she'll like chime in every once in a while. But Josh Brolin got a far better treatment than I feel like the good majority of the other supporting cast member. He's of course the priest, the father, whatever the hell you call it in the Catholic religion. The church they have is called
Monsignor.
yeah, the Monsignor, the Church Our Lady of Perpetual Fortitude, I believe is the name of their church. And I thought Josh Brolin did a great job with his pulpit scenes and all of that. There was also an elderly woman that I thought did a more than serviceable job with the
Glenn
material.
Close?
Yeah,
Yeah, I liked her too.
And I think so. There were a lot of good elements of it. I agree with the list of criticisms that Gavin offered about how, from a production value standpoint, from a cinematography standpoint, this film was constructed. I mean, basically across the board, like you would construct a Netflix miniseries. If this had been 5 30-minute episodes or 4 30-minute episodes on Netflix, it would have made a lot more sense to me. It reminded me a lot of like Midnight Mass or something that has already been done by high level director, somebody like Mike Flanagan, but when they do a show for Netflix, like it didn't have the scale or the grandeur of a real cinematic experience. And it's a bummer, right? Because you can tell that Netflix didn't want to spend a ton of money on it because they're like, we're not going to show it in very many theaters. Rian Johnson demands some theaters get to see it, right? But they don't want to show it in a bunch of theaters. They didn't want to show Frankenstein in a bunch of theaters. It's terrible. They want to put movie theaters out of business, right? That's their whole idea. That's the whole concept. And so they didn't anticipate that they would make their money back, so they give them the budget of how you have to operate within like streaming service return on investment instead of like massive box office return on investment. And I think that's just a huge mistake for Netflix. And it this time around made me really disappointed that this didn't stay like a Lionsgate film or that Warner Brothers hadn't picked it up, because I think they would have understood, hey, we're really onto something. This is a film that could make $100 million if you gave it a full release over Thanksgiving. I genuinely think it could make if you'd given it a full budget and it looked and felt like the first Knives Out movie, I think it would have done blockbuster numbers for the kind of budget that you could have given it. You make it for 60 million, it does 100 million. That's a damn good, payday for the studio, and it also keeps the brand in a place where it's not like, oh yeah, that's just a Netflix brand now. That's a Netflix franchise. It has that prestige value. And I just think it was a missed opportunity to not give it a little bit more love.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison you make with Midnight Mass. But I think that Midnight Mass nails so much of what this film tries to, but fails to, with that small town drama. With those character dynamics, the gossip, the people turning on each other behind each other's backs, and the actual small town vibe. That movie really, soaks in the kind of coastal New England, small town island vibe, whatever, and you really feel that. It's one of my favorite things about that show. But I do agree that it feels more like something on that scale, just maybe not as successfully pulled off. That's an interesting comparison. And yeah, if you want to see something similar where there is like a mystery at the center of it, but all these kind of small town characters and the drama that surrounds them and their personal lives and these religious themes too. Yeah, the more I think about it, Rian Johnson might have just sat down and watched Midnight Mass and then been like, hey, I have an idea for a new Knives Out movie. It really does seem like there's a lot of connective tissue there, which is funny. I do agree about Josh Brolin. I think he's definitely one of the standouts in this film. Whenever he's on screen, you're paying attention. His character is funny and kind of unhinged in a very watchable way, and in a way that I think does play to Josh Brolin's strengths, much like the Weapon script. I really thought played to Josh
Yeah,
Brolin's
he's
strengths.
great in that.
Yeah, I thought that was such a brilliant casting of Josh Brolin in Weapons. It blows my mind that they were originally going to cast Pedro Pascal in that role,
Really?
because to me it seems like it was literally written for Brolin. Not that I don't like Pedro Pascal, but Brolin just seemed perfectly cast in Weapons. Then I felt that he was really misused in The Running Man, which we recently saw, where he plays the villain. But again, here I thought that yeah, they understood his talents as an actor. They understood the kind of character that he really excels at playing, and they let him ham it up here. They let him go crazy, which is a lot of fun to watch. Unfortunately, and I'm interested in your opinion on this, Zach. The only problem I have with the Josh Brolin character is that through the Josh Brolin character, the film inserts a lot of what I consider to be kind of heavy-handed political commentary, and whereas Glass Onion felt like political satire that really had interesting and insightful things to say, for example, about the tech world and about tech oligarchs like Elon Musk. To me, this film it kind of tread ground that I felt has already been covered better in a lot of movies. And while it was clearly trying to comment on the Trump era that we're in right now, it just never felt as smart or as unique as what was presented in Glass Onion. And ultimately, for a film that wants to have this big debate about religion in it at the heart of it all, I don't really think it ever said anything truly interesting about religion or Christianity that hasn't already been articulated in other films. So I didn't hate the religious commentary. I didn't hate the political commentary, but I did feel that it was a pretty significant step back from the political commentary in Glass Onion, which I wasn't really expecting. I didn't know that movie was going to be as specifically political and obviously an allegory about Elon Musk and stuff. I thought that really worked in Glass Onion, and to see them kind of try to do it again here, I was just like, I don't know. It felt a little bit unnecessary. It felt like, all right, does every Knives Out movie have to be a freaking political statement too, or like a commentary on the Trump era? I don't know. If it works, it works. But here, I just didn't think that the commentary really had the teeth or anything truly interesting to say in the way that the last couple movies did.
Yeah, it definitely didn't have anything unique or original to say. And you're right that in Midnight Mass, though, I think I wasn't like blown away by the visuals in Midnight Mass. I definitely think that it also suffered from some of the Netflixification and all of that jazz. It did have thematically more to say and more to consider. You could tell Mike Flanagan has a lot more uh, thoughts on Catholicism maybe than Ryan Johnson does, and he just thought it would make like a convenient backdrop as how it felt. And of course, the Josh Brolin lines were heavy handed. To me, I'm like, maybe nobody else will pick up on subtlety. Like, I don't want to be that guy, but I've just started to be like, the people in the audience were laughing like hyenas. And I'm here being like, oh, you'll go for that. Like, you'll go for, okay, that's enough to get a laugh from you. Like, all right, maybe the chat GPT generation is already here. And so if you try and do layered commentary, you lose $100 million. And so you just have to come out here and beat people over the head and be like, this is about Donald Trump. This is about America right now. Because of, yeah, I also was like rolling my eyes at some of the shit that people were just eating up in the auditorium with us. So I think there's a lot of that. I tried to just take it with a grain of salt and be like, this is what normies like. All right, I watch way too many movies. Maybe I'm being harsh about this. I kept in the back of my mind when I was watching this how much Roger Ebert would defend American Pie, which you brought up to me the other day. And I was like, he clearly ignored some things when he was having fun with that. So I'll have fun with this franchise. I think it's a fun franchise. On Letterboxd, I wrote a thing about the magic of the movies and gave it 3.5 stars. I think my film critic brain gives it 3 stars and says it's fun. Go see it. I think people in your family will like it. But it's a step down for sure from Glass Onion, which I thought was a small but not meaningful step down from the original Knives Out.
Totally agree. I'd go 6 or 7 out of 10. Also, it's not bad. It's not offensive, but it is a major step down, and it's the worst Knives Out movie yet. The last small nitpick I have, and I know I sound again really negative on this movie, despite the fact that I enjoyed it and liked it and recommend it. I do think it was a bit of a step back for the Benoit Blanc character too. In Glass Onion, I thought they added some interesting new dimensions to the Benoit Blanc character and made him something that was the same but also different from the way he was portrayed in the first Knives Out movie. And it's not like he was necessarily the main character of Glass Onion 2, but it did start to feel like it was more approaching that, where it's like, okay, Benoit Blanc is the main dude here. We're gonna show a little bit of him before he gets to the island. We're gonna give some insight into his life. There's even that weird moment that implied he was gay in
Yeah.
Glass Onion, and I was kind of wondering if they would follow up on that at all here. Not that it really matters, they don't, but I don't know. It felt like in this film he kind of just like swoops in and plays and almost plays more the comedic relief character than anything. Like, oh, like now he's just a cartoon character or something. Like, oh, there's Benoit Blanc and he just said something funny and the whole theater's gonna laugh. But it kind of makes him more of a punchline than an actual serious detective that you really believe can crack any case in the way that the first movie portrays him, and also the second, right? Where it's like, yes, he's funny and he does provide a lot of comedic relief, but they also take him seriously. I do feel like they're kind of starting to go in the direction of like making him the comedic relief character who just kind of comes in to provide that levity. I still love Daniel Craig in this movie. The fashion is on point. I like his new hairstyle. He gives it his all, and he's still like easily the best thing about this film. But I was kind of hoping that they would continue to develop that character in more interesting ways rather than just bringing him in to do the Benoit Blanc thing and then have the third act spiel where he solves the case. It just felt again very reminiscent of the first movie, but not as good, and a little bit of a missed opportunity to do something interesting with that character.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, that's just a script problem where they spent way too much time on Josh O'Connor, who I like, but he got at least like 75% of the screen time, and they didn't. It's too much for an ensemble cast. Anyways,
Yeah, great review. I thought that was a good discussion of the film. We touched on most of the criticisms we had, but ultimately, yeah, still a fun time. I'm glad these movies are being made. And I hope that Ryan Johnson and Daniel Craig are able to put together a fourth one. For some reason, I'd love to see them go to Vegas. I think that would be a great, because you could kind of reference like
Or
Casino Royale,
Miami.
Miami too. But I think with the casino stuff, like
That would be cool.
you could kind of have some references to Casino Royale, which obviously was the origination of Daniel Craig's iconic 007 role, but totally set it in the Knives Out world with some social commentary about the onlineification of gambling. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot there, and obviously Vegas is just such an iconic location, so rich with a visual, just insanity
I'm
and crime. Yeah, and again, this film just felt kind of flat when it came to the setting and the atmosphere, and it felt like a small town, but not really a small town. And also, like, half of the characters, I was like, why are you even in this small town? Like the guy who you mentioned, who I did like, the GOP candidate who was like a streamer, like YouTuber. I'm like, why are you living in this like small ass New York town? Did you hear that explained?
Oh yeah, it's because he wanted the fortune.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
I
he
guess
was
that makes
after
sense.
he was the offspring of Josh Brolin, and he also knew about the fortune, and so he was waiting to get his cut. Oh
That
shit, that's a spoiler though. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I get you're right about that. But still, a lot of these other characters, I'm just like, why are you in this small town? Like, none of them really seem like small town people. Like,
Yeah.
even the Kaylee Spaney character, I'm like, you seem like someone that would be living in like New York City or the suburbs or something. And like, this film just continually introduces these characters that seem too kind of glossy and like well dressed and stuff. I'm just like, they don't really seem like really small town people, except for a few of them, like Thomas Hayden Church, who I did really like, but again is criminally fucking underutilized. He's in the movie for like 5 fucking minutes, even though
Yeah.
he's always fire in it. But either way, I did like this film. There was some good stuff in it.